Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. In the early portions of the college football season, you are not going to see many more intriguing out of conference matchups than Bryce Underwood in this Michigan football program heading on the road to play Brent Venables, calling the defense for the Oklahoma Sooners. Many of y'all know I'm a Michigan fan. I immediately look at this matchup and say it's a true freshman quarterback making his first road start. And it couldn't be a worse situation. You're going to Norman, Oklahoma, playing a defense that is very good, coming off a very good 2024 year. And Brent Venables is going to be calling the defense. I look at this matchup and say, Till, it's two very, very good defenses going up against two offenses that stunk last year, like flat out stunk, both of them. But you're not really sure what you're going to get from both of these offenses in 2025. You got two new quarterbacks on both sides of the football. You got two new offensive coordinators on both sides of the football. It is one of, if not the most fascinating matchups we see early in this college football season. Fired up to get into it. A lot of nitty-gritty matchups that I want to get into now. Before we get into it, as always, whether you're a Michigan fan, whether you're an Oklahoma fan, let it rip in the comment section. Dill, we say this all the time. The best part about doing these game breakdowns early in May and June, and we're going to talk about it plenty over the next couple of months, but the only ones who are watching this episode are the fans who live and breathe both of these programs. And I'm sure y'all got takes. Please let it rip in the comment section. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, without further ado, can we start overarching before we get nitty gritty? I feel like this game can very well come down to which offenses find those game-changing explosive plays. Because I think both fan bases feel this way. Like, I'm a Michigan fan. It's hard to see Michigan going down to Norman, Oklahoma and routinely moving the football on this Oklahoma defense, right? 14, 12 play drives where you're putting points up on the board. And I'm sure many Oklahoma fans probably feel the same way against an elite Michigan defense. Which teams can find those 1, 2, or 3 plays, I think is going to be a massive part. Overarching takes, how do you see this game kind of playing out here?
And that's it. I think you got to start when you talk explosiveness. Deion Burks for Oklahoma is the most explosive player in this game, in my opinion, especially as it pertains to pass catchers. Because
yeah, I agree.
Michigan, that was the frustrating part. It's probably the part a lot of Michigan fans have a certain degree of skepticism going into this year is what do they have in terms of pass catchers who can create matchups, who can create things down the field. Deion Burks for Oklahoma, I feel like people forget about how dynamic he can be when he's at his best. And last year he wasn't healthy. The offense obviously was really, really struggling in general. You talk about like explosive plays. Deion Burks feels like the guy who in this game is very capable.
And I will say you got two quarterbacks that can do it too. And like you look at Michigan last year with a guy like Davis Warren, you didn't have a quarterback that could make things happen. Now, Bryce Underwood's a true freshman. We have not seen him play at the collegiate ranks yet, but you kind of know he has that ability to make game-changing plays. So that should make Michigan fans at least feel like, hey, we're going to have some life on the offensive side of the football. Now, circling back to your take on Deion Burks, because I think that's a good one. Can Michigan find a way to quiet Deion Burks' impact on this football game and make the other pass catchers and difference makers on this Oklahoma offense hurt them? Because I think many Oklahoma fans would probably agree with this. Hey, we know Deion Burks is an all-American caliber pass catcher. What are you going to get from Giovanni Gibson, who's jumping up from the FCS ranks to the Power 4 level, coming off an injury in spring? Isaiah Satania or a guy like Ivan Carrion. What else does Oklahoma have outside of Deion Burks and Jaden Knott's probably a question. And if you're Wink Martindale, you're saying, hey, we're going to roll into Norman, Oklahoma. We're not going to let Deion Burks beat us, and we're going to make you show that your other pass catchers on the outside can bring some juice and create kind of game-changing plays.
Especially because, again, I just feel like it'll be hard for Oklahoma to generically drive the ball because they are, I feel like, going to give up too many negative plays, especially because the tackle spot for Oklahoma is the Achilles heel, or at least it still feels like that unless you see some monster strides.
Yeah, it's the question. Because that's probably where we should start with this matchup, right? I mean, you look at Oklahoma and say, look, got a ton of confidence in John Mateer. I watched him rip it up at Washington State last year. Got a ton of confidence in Jaden Knott, ton of confidence in Deion Burks. This Oklahoma team, not only in this football game, but throughout the 2025 year on offense, is going to go as far as this offensive line can take them. Last year, that offensive line, I know Jackson Arnold was not perfect. That offensive line didn't give this offense a chance. Well, you got a Michigan defensive line that we think is going to be very good. And I know the national media is focusing on all right, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are going off to the NFL draft. No, this Michigan defensive line is going to be really good. Can Oklahoma find ways to run the football, and can Oklahoma find ways to protect John Mateer to get the footballs to your playmakers? That's probably where you have to start this conversation.
And then John Mateer's running ability is probably going
That's
to
a
be
huge
huge.
factor.
If they find a way to run the ball, it's probably going to be him being able to make plays and, again, give some misdirection, because that was another – you talk about some issues Michigan had earlier in the season in 2024. I mean, just having good eye discipline from the linebackers, filling holes the right way, being solid from the spot, and then you slow the edge rushers down a little bit by getting John Mateer involved.
It feels like if Oklahoma wants to run the football effectively against Michigan, John Mateer has to play a part. John Mateer's extreme, 51 missed tackles forced last year. John Mateer's running numbers and his running film is more impressive than some running backs when they have the football in his hands. That's the difference maker that I think John Mateer can be. And that's, if you're an Oklahoma fan, that's the optimism you're grabbing hold to heading into this is, hey, we got a quarterback that can hurt teams in a lot of different ways, whether it's running the football or whether it's just extending plays, getting outside the pocket and throwing off platform, of which he does very well. And you look at Michigan and say, hey, these linebackers are going to have a game. Jayshon Barham, Ernest Hausman, you are probably going to be responsible for dealing with the quarterback spy. Can Jayshon Barham and Ernest Hausman fly around the football field and go tackle John Mateer? Certainly a question as well. We made it 7 minutes still, and we haven't even mentioned Bryce Underwood yet. Bryce Underwood making it'll be a second career start, his first road start in Norman, Oklahoma against Brent Venables. Dill, I'll ask you this. And let's just start with this. This Oklahoma defense was freaking awesome last year. And I know that early in Brent Venables' tenure, he got a lot of heat, and rightfully so. The defense the first couple of years, it wasn't kind of what we expected. Well, it was in 2024. They were top 10 against the run. They were top 10 in sack percentage. When you look at Michigan and Chip Lindsey and Bryce Underwood heading on the road into this hostile environment, what does Michigan need to do to put up points and move the football effectively in this football game?
I mean, it's going to start with finding somebody who can be a matchup problem, because at least last year there were moments where Colson Loveland could be that guy. He was really good. They'd really force feed him the football. I think Michigan's got to find someone who in the pass game, because their rushing attack, I think, should be good. Again, I don't necessarily see them hammering it on Oklahoma, because Oklahoma's really, really good in the front seven. I think they have a better chance of running the ball somewhat effectively than maybe Oklahoma does personally. But I think Michigan's going to have to find something in the air that they can go to with some degree of reliability, because that was always the issue last year, especially when Loveland wasn't playing, is who was going to be the guy.
I think I'll say a similar thing. My confidence in John Mateer is just higher because I've seen him do it at the college football level. But from what we heard out of spring from Bryce Underwood, we know he's talented enough to make it happen. Is there enough around him to have this new form Michigan offense is the question. Dill, I look at Donovan McCulley. You asked, hey, who's going to be the guy? Transfer from Indiana. He goes 6'5", 205. Especially against an Oklahoma defense that was really good in a lot of different facets. They did give up some explosives through the air. I mean, they gave up 7.6 yards per pass attempt. That was outside of the top 80 last year. Dill, I really like Eli Bowen out there on the boundary, but he is 5'9". Can Donovan McCulley be the guy that when you're looking for an explosive play, you're looking to push the ball down the field? Can he go up and make plays for Bryce Underwood? That feels like the biggest storyline, again, not only in this football game, but really for the season in Michigan in 2025.
Yeah, because they're going to need something more dependable than what you feel like they've had. And then, obviously, I mean, you talk about the rushing attack. Bryce Underwood's probably going to need to take 10-plus carries just like John Mateer will. So I think that's going to be a huge part of this game is what can Michigan do. Yeah. That was something I think a lot of Michigan fans found really frustrating last year. Is Alex Orji was you almost okay, well, I know there's not great wide receivers. I know we don't really have an arm in the quarterback room that's particularly great. can Alex Orji find something in the rushing attack? And he just didn't have that feel for it. Like John Mateer, you feel when you put the film on,
And
he handles the ball
I'll
well. He's really comfortable
I'll say
running.
this with Bryce though, like Bryce showed that I know it's high school versus playing an SEC defense, but Bryce's athleticism is the most slept on part of his game. And this kid could be a Division I wide receiver if he wanted to, in terms of the size and the athleticism he brings to the table. I feel like you're right. Both John Mateer and Bryce Underwood. There will be games for Michigan and Oklahoma where you don't have to run your quarterback. You don't want him taking 15 hits a game. This ain't one of them. Like, if you want to win this football game, both Bryce Underwood and John Mateer, you feel like will have to be involved in the rushing attack, because it's hard to see Michigan or Oklahoma base running and having a ton of success against both of these front sevens. Last thing I'll say is, you're looking for Chip Lindsey to give him a little quick game and just some easy stuff. You know, whether it's to a guy like Samaj Morgan, who we think has a ton of juice with the football in his hands, for two different reasons. Number one, you want the ball out quick and give Bryce some confidence, especially on the road in Norman. Number two, Dill, our Mason Thomas, whether it's PJ Adibari, whether it's Danny Okoye, whether it's David Stone on the inside, this pass rush is legit. And I think as us Michigan fans are rolling into 2025, we still have concerns about this offensive line holding up in pass protection. It wasn't nearly as good as we thought it was going to be. In 2024, you probably don't want to have Bryce just sitting in the pocket a lot, because you have some legitimate dudes coming off the edge for Oklahoma.
And I do think that is probably some degree of a question, because the only guy I think you really know from Oklahoma is our Mason Thomas. Now, there's a lot of talent in that edge room.
Yeah.
You haven't really seen it quite yet. Like Marvin Jones Jr.,
Yeah.
you haven't really seen him play with any degree of consistency.
Yep.
PJ Adibari, you've seen some flashes, but you haven't seen a ton of consistency.
I'll say this, though, and I get where you're coming from. I'll say this. There's a little bit of blind trust that they're going to – I mean, they had a very good pass rush last year. There's some blind, I know.
They're going to go rusher from the inside.
Yes.
Grayson Halton might be one of the better interior D-line pass rushers in the game. David Stone, maybe he takes a step forward and kind of takes in.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit of juice going as well. Yeah. But I don't know. I do look like, is this pass rush going to be what it was last year? Because they have a lot of really good players to replace. Especially,
I think it could. I'm not gonna lie. I think it could be better, and maybe that's just like me leaning too much into some projections of guys like PJ and Danny Okoye and David Stone, maybe. But they've recruited that position exceptionally well. And they got a lot of what is it, axes in the fire in terms of guys that could hit, and I feel like some of them are gonna hit in 2025. And I probably butchered that. It was
irons in the fire.
Irons in the fire. Axes in the fire. That's not good enough. All right. Last thing I'll shout out before we go to our pick here. And we kind of said it at the top with explosive plays on offense. Brent Venables, Wink Martindale, very aggressive defensive coordinators. They are going to look to have their defense put their fingerprint on this football game. Whether it's a turnover in a red zone stealing points off the board, whether it's a turnover setting up your offense with a short field. It feels like one of these defenses will make a play that can change this game. Which defense is it going to be? Especially with true freshman quarterback and Bryce Underwood. All right, let's get into the pick. Dill, I'm not worried about the spread right now. Michigan on the road against Oklahoma. I'll give it to you. Which pick here?
I hate to do it, but I lean Oklahoma just because of what John Mateer can do. I mean, it comes down to I just know exactly what he is. I feel like, just a really dynamic playmaker at the quarterback spot, something Oklahoma desperately needed. Yep. And then Deion Burks. I just look, both these defenses are kind of equally complete. I feel like really, really loaded, really talented, play really well together. I just have a lot more faith right now going in with John Mateer and probably that. In Deion Burks, because I do think he is far and away the best wide receiver.
Yeah, and I hate to do it too. I probably do lean Oklahoma as we sit right now, and it's one of those games that Dill, and I know I've said this for a couple of these early game previews, but I'll say it again for this one. The pick could be different if this game was played in the end of November.
Well, if I see Bryce look awesome in game one, that might.
I guess just ripping it up against New Mexico and Ann Arbor.
Look, you can take some sense, I think, of you can tell if a quarterback's really good, even in games where they're outclassing teams. If Bryce looks awesome, that maybe changes it. But as it stands right now, it's really hard to pick against what John Mateer is doing.
See,
Especially
you're
when
picking
they're
from
also
that.
really close around.
You're picking from that standpoint, and I pick from the other side where it's like true freshman quarterback on the road against the Brent Venables defense is just it. I think it scares a lot of Michigan fans. So we're both leaning Michigan. It's going to be such a fun game, and it is. I'll say this: one of the hardest games to predict right now as well, because you'll want to get a sense of what both of these offenses are. So we'll revisit this game plenty of times. Hell, Dill, I get a couple more positive feedbacks from Bryce Underwood in fall camp. I might be switching my prediction. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.